Hello, welcome everyone to today's podcast. Super happy to have you back again. And today I'm super excited about this conversation. I have been looking forward to this one. This is a special one. I'm bringing you a special guest and friend today. And yeah, please welcome Petra. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a while, right, that this was in the making. I'm super
Yes,
excited.
yes, and super special. So, before we start, give us a little bit of an intro into who you are. What's the fun thing about you that we get to know?
Let us start with the fun thing, right? The fun thing is how we met. We met at a dinner, if I remember correctly. It was a dinner where you were invited to be a speaker at for a nonprofit organization that was founded by my husband. It's called Wisdom. And Wisdom had you come in to speak to the young females. Women stands for Women in Science, demonstrating outstanding merit. And if I remember correctly, it was the evening before you had your great
Yes,
speech.
yes.
And we met on a personal level. And I think we found out that we have so many things in common that I didn't know before. I was really surprised that there are so many things that unite us. And it was a wonderful conversation and beautiful connection from the very first moment onwards.
Yes, yes, I vividly remember that night and the conversation and how you made me feel during the conversation and after. So it was a great trip, not just meeting the young women the next day and everybody else, but yeah, including you, meeting you. And we've been talking since, and then we had this idea that let's have you here. Let's talk about this topic that is dear to my heart, which is engineering. And today we'll add this other topic, spirituality. So we'll we're gonna give you a roadmap to all this, and it's gonna be super exciting. So let's start with how engineering connects into here, and that would be you because you are an engineer. So tell me more about your journey into engineering.
Yeah, by education, I'm an engineer and scientist. And this was what I thought would be my lifelong career, right? This is what I thought is interesting. This is what I was excited about. This is how I was raised. I grew up in the eastern part of Germany. Now I'm dating myself, but yes, I lived there until the wall came down. And this was the path, right? The support from the outside world. Does it make sense? Do something real good, do something with your hands and your mind, your analytical mind. And I liked it. I really did. I mean, I don't say I loved it, but what I knew about it, right, what I could imagine was really a connection. And I started my professional career in that direction, graduated from the university in Berlin with master's degrees in engineering and science. And it makes me think about everything now as you raised the question, right? What happened then? And it's a lot. So how to put it into words so that you can process and understand what happened to me and with me. And starting out as an engineer in the modern world, which I thought was the path. And then I had my first near-death experience. And at that time, I had no idea what a near-death experience ever is. I've never heard about that. I had no clue. And the internet wasn't available, so studying
Yeah, we
things.
couldn't just get on it and look it up, put it
Oh,
in Google.
Right, it was not available. I had never read a book about that. It was absolutely not on my horizon. And I would say not on my analytical horizon, and the other one w wasn't there. I
I like how
didn't
you said that.
I didn't have access to the other part of me, right? And this was quite an experience that really turned my life upside down. I just I just had married, just be, had delivered a baby, and out of a sudden, nothing was how it was before. I could not make sense out of that experience, and I tried to talk myself out of it. I was so scared that I did not share anything about that near-death experience with anyone for 6 years. And at the point where I had almost ruined my marriage by not speaking about what was fighting inside of me, Dirk sat me down and said, "We have to talk." And I knew this was really serious. And I didn't want to lose my family. I didn't want to lose the love of my life. And I also didn't want to lose my sanity. So I asked him to give me a promise. And today, right, 30 years late, almost 30 years later, it sounds crazy, but at that time, this is what I felt and what was going on. The only promise I asked him to give me was to not put me in a facility. This was my biggest fear, that he would declare me insane, that I had lost my mind. And then he gave me the promise, and then I talked about what I had experienced. And his reaction was completely different than I had expected. And he said, "Okay, if this is what you've experienced, then we have to deal with it. We have to find a solution that you can live with it." And by that time, as I finally talked to him, I had experienced another one. And after our conversation, I had a third one. And the experience has been really intense. But how I could handle it was very different, because now I wasn't alone anymore with my spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
And can you imagine being trained and used to solely rely on your analytical engineering mind, the scientific mind, right? And suddenly there is something else that you've never heard about, to comprehend that and make sense of it and put it together. The engineer and the scientist, they want to make sense of it, right? This was not possible to me at that time. And to put it together, because it was together inside of me, that was a huge challenge.
So I cannot imagine. So let's just put it out there. Um, Because it's this world of you have something which you have the evidence of something, but you can't explain it scientifically. It's the no words, but I know it happened. No word, no theory, no concept. What is it? But I know it happened because all your senses, all your body's telling you it happened. But
Yes.
what I'm more curious about is this your choice to be lonely with it, to be alone with it, and to carry it almost like as a secret. Um, could you tell me more about, you know, what was behind making that decision? And I'm asking because I'm being curious because we might have somebody who's listening who went through, something similar or something the same important to them and they're carrying it and or they're thinking about carrying it and maybe they can, pull on your wisdom here.
Yes, I understand that. And at the time, I mean, we probably have to reflect on the same topic from two perspectives, right? At the time, then, me being a young woman, not knowing that near-death experiences exist, and reflecting back on the same situation with knowing what I now know now, right? Those are two different things.
Yes.
At
Yes.
that time, I was 27 years old. I didn't realize that it actually was a choice. I thought this was the only way how I could handle it because I've created solutions in my head, right? The engineer asks questions, so does the scientist.
Yes.
And I asked myself a million questions. What was that? What was it about? And I created a solution in my head. So the solution was my brain made it up. I must be crazy. Maybe I dreamt it. And then the internal fight started because it was so vivid, much more vivid than any dream I ever had until then and until today. So I didn't see it as a decision, and I didn't realize that it was a choice at that time. My fear was so tremendously intense that I didn't see a different way. So I think most of us, your listeners, our listeners, we can relate to
Yes.
situations where you're on the midst of the storm, of the perfect storm, right? And you don't see
Yes.
that there is a different way you could potentially choose. I think this is what happened at that time. I thought the only way to not lose my sanity, to not lose everything that really meant a lot to me, was to not talk about it because I questioned myself so much that the only solution that I could see at the time was trying to ignore it, but didn't
Yes.
really work out, right?
Yes. I mean, it's great that it didn't work out
Yeah.
because we know how the story continued. But I mean, it's so powerful what you're saying, Petra, and I can relate. And I know people had clients who talked about the same thing that I didn't know I had a choice because the fear of losing the life, the people in my life, those who I love, was greater than pretty much everything else. So it overrode everything. That was the number one. So to not talk about it, to keep it to oneself, it was the solution. So I
Yeah.
relate. Yes.
Yeah. And of course, with hindsight, and also with my second near-death experience that I already had at the time, I didn't put it into action. So with every experience, I was given an important message. And I want to share with all of you here because my hope is that it helps you and maybe faster than it did help me because I didn't put it into action. And the second message was you always have a choice. And I had the information already, yet couldn't really comprehend it. I couldn't really understand the greatness of that message, that it applies to all of us and our entire lives. I was so into that scientific question, what, right? Scientists
What's happening? What?
do want to understand what's happening, what's going on, what is it?
Yeah.
Engineers want to understand the how. Right? How does this work? How can I improve it? How can I make this more efficient? How can I make this more precise? So those questions, the what and the how, didn't really bring me forward in that endeavor. So yeah, that was an intense time not knowing that there is a choice, even though I had the information already, couldn't apply it. Today, I know. And when I'm in a situation, and this still happens, right? And I'm in a situation where I think, oh my gosh, it is dark. I don't know how I can get out of this situation. What can I do? I remember that moment and I apply other questions. And when I work with my clients, with my private clients, and also with corporate clients, we add other questions and we add the question that spirituality asks. This is why. And when we understand the what, the how, and the why, then we find a solution. We find multiple options, and then we become aware that we can choose.
Mm. Well, let's break that down even more. Tell us more. Maybe start with what I'm curious about is you said that you knew that they were messages to take action. Um, you know, how did you know? I'm sure others are listening. Like, how did she know? How did you know?
So let me start with the first near-death experience. This happened as we lived in Berlin and we spoke German, nothing else but German. And I was pulled out of my body and I had a moment to observe the scene. It was right after I had delivered our daughter. And I watched them working very intensely, super busy, and a lot of people being really, yeah, focused. And I remember myself thinking, oh, that's interesting. It's good to keep them busy. And then I was pulled away really quickly. And I had this, what I learned afterwards, what many people describe. I had this pull into the light. Some people experience a long tunnel. For me, it was quick, short, intense. And then I was in this super warm, bright, phenomenal, fantastic light. There's nothing that I can compare to it here on earth. I don't know anything that would compare. And suddenly I was in this light, and it was so light, bright light, and I felt light. It was really blissful. There was suddenly no pain at all. It was just being, love, compassion, all the things that we on earth label beautiful, nice emotions, right? The feelings.
Yes.
There was nothing that we on earth label negative. So I was greeted by souls. This is what I call them now, right? And a person that I knew from my earlier life as a child, she had passed on pretty early, and had met her maybe 2 or 3 times in my life, my great aunt. And she greeted me and she showed me around and she told me that I would have insight into everything that's available, the omni knowing. And then God spoke to me. And to me, it was so clear. He didn't introduce himself. And to me, he is male. I saw the face, the shape of his face. And I heard him say in English, the world needs to know. And then he disappeared. And yeah, okay, the world needs to know. What does this have to do with me, right? And then my great aunt showed me around, gave me information, gave me insights, and then they wanted to send me back. And I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to return. Even though I was fully aware that I had just delivered our beautiful daughter, that I was married, I didn't want to go back because it was so nice up there. There wasn't a choice for me. They sent me back and it was harsh. and I had to fit into my body again, the body they were still working on. And that body felt so small compared to what had to fit into this body. And it was extremely painful. I was back in so much pain, the pain that I had before, and even more pain with the message, with knowing that I did not had before or no access to before. And that information the world needs to know. And maybe this was so big that I did not want to see it, that my brain, the subconscious brain, protected me
Yeah.
by keeping it even more as a secret. And I did, and I realized later, for 6 years, I did the opposite of what I was told. The world needs to know. And I did exactly the opposite. Now I know. And 20 years later, I was voluntold to speak on stage about my experience. I was invited by a friend. We are still friends.
Oh, good.
I mean, there have been a couple of minutes in between where I was really not friends with him. He invited me to an event and it was of interest to me. And I showed up and we met there, and then I was looking for a seat I could take. And then one of the organizers came to me and said, "Oh, no, 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 you are not sitting there. You are the speaker." Yeah. So, okay. So I needed a couple of nudges to finally follow through and help to bring the messages to the world. That was the first experience. And it was so clear and so intense that I, yeah, fought against it for so long. The second message didn't take me 20 some years to realize what it meant, right? You always have a choice. And the third message came a couple of years later is you don't have to fear.
Mm.
There is no fear needed. Quote, there is no fear needed, end quote. And fear was what was holding me back initially, and sometimes today, fear is trying to get in the way. And I remember those messages, and hopefully, hopefully everyone out there, everyone who is listening to that, when fear takes over, remember that. Fear only wants to protect you, right? Fear is not bad per se. Fear is trying to protect us from new things, from new adventures. And what I do now is I invite fear to come along. And I imagine being in the car with my fear. Fear can come with me, but I need her to sit in the back. And if it's really intense, she can sit on the passenger seat, but she is not allowed to touch the radio. Kind of
I
that's the
love
flip
that
side.
visual. I love that visual. Not allowed to touch the radio. But you can come along. I mean, you know, first, thanks for sharing. You know, I'm imagining what would, someone who's listening for the first time be curious about. And I wanna acknowledge that the fear, I think we all can relate to that side of any event in our lives. That fear can be so intense and so pulling us, I don't know, down, up, whichever direction you imagine yourself. But it's to more like keeping us in a position that it found us before. So it's as is the I don't want you to change.
Mhm.
I want you to, take no action, no change, no spreading the message, don't do anything, just stay who you are, stay the same. Um, like that part is something that I know I experienced myself.
Mhm.
And and it explains the 6 years that you went through. Like you know, it seems a lot, 6 years, but then 6 years go by so fast. And especially when you are raising a child, as you
Mhm.
said, you had your daughter, so life totally changed, and there was somebody else to focus on, and kind of took your attention, or you focused on her to raise her, to be her mother, that you took the focus away from yourself in order to, um, as you said, make sense of what's going on. But this part of seeing the message, that is so beautiful. So I wanted to I wanted to turn my attention to that one, because I'm a believer too that we are shown and told messages every day. And it's the part where, do I want to see it, or do I want to ignore it? Like, do I believe that I'm seeing a message, or do I make up a different story? And as an engineer, the first reaction of an engineer is to, as you said, to find the how and then the what. And we leave the why behind. So when was that moment for you when you surrendered and accepted this third third question, the why?
It was a process again. And I mean, yes, I agree. 6 years seems awfully long, right? When you're in the middle of this transition, and I needed a long time to recover from the procedure and everything. And it was a long journey of recovery. It was not that we took our daughter home and I was healthy again. So I was very occupied with managing my daily life. There was no room nor energetic room for improvement at that time. And I obviously had changed, that experiences had changed me so much. And I had not realized that. I needed my husband to point it out in the way he did, luckily. But that that change in me was for me very subtle. To me, it was normal. I felt like the same person who just, quote unquote, had two very intense experiences. But obviously, I was not behaving the same anymore. And when did the change happen? I think with the approval that I could talk about it, that I was allowed to process it. I was not in that golden cage that I had created for myself kept any longer. That was the turning point. And I remembered that I once had kind of a sit down with myself and asked the scientific and engineering questions. Why do we have two hemispheres? Right? The why is the spiritual question, yes, but this is what I wanted to know. And first came, okay, what do I have up here? Because I had created that story that probably I had made it up. So what do I have there? I have two hemispheres. And I voluntarily, not so much, but yes, through conditioning, I focus solely on that left hemisphere, right? Me as a right-handed person. So I ignored my right hemisphere, and also the corpus callosum, the bridge that bridges both. And that realization that I did not want to limit myself any longer. I remember that I decided, and it really gave me goosebumps and a good feeling. Okay, I have two halves of the brain up there, most certainly for a reason. And there is a bridge. So it's not either or, it is and, A and D. You can use, and maybe you have to use both parts of your brain. And this was the breakthrough for me. This lifted the fear, that lifted the shame, right? This lifted the guilt of not being able to process the experience, of not being able to live like other people did, right? What I saw from the outside, what did I know? Now I know so much more. But how it appeared to me was I was not normal.
Yeah.
Giving myself permission to use what I have lifted that heaviness, liberated me. And from that moment on, I gave a promise to myself and I gave it to God that I will make good use of what He gave me. And this is two hemispheres and a brain.
You know, we're, I acknowledge I'm laughing and I'm happy that we have this joy in the room. Um, and I want to acknowledge something that really struck me, and I know it was an important pivot in my life too. This moment that kind of makes me emotional. That as humans, we all want to, we grow up, and then most of us, I want to say, are being picked at school for some reason. And the one thing that I think we all want at some point in our lives as children, as grown-ups, is to be normal. We want to be normal, to be part of the normal society, the normal friends group, the normal, I don't know, sports group, the this ideal place of normal,
Yeah.
to be accepted and seen for who we are, and all that. Uh, and the opposite, the other side of that is to not have weird things, to not be weird, to not be strange, to not be, um, yeah, picked at and seen. But at the same time, as you're describing, what is normal? Like, we create this image in our head of what normal is, and then we're trying to fit in, and we totally ignore who we are. We totally ignore that we have two sides of our brain and then a bridge. Um, so it's so beautiful. And what you said, that really just finding what we have and taking that as normal, starting there. What is it that makes us who we are? And discovering that.
Yes, and I think we have to rethink or even redefine what is normal, right? Normal in general, how we understand it, is what the majority does. We consider normal what the majority of people do. And it's like a bell curve, right? There is a
Those in the middle,
There's in the
yes.
middle, that center, that's what we consider normal. And when we are outside of that center section, we blame ourselves for being weird or strange or not normal. And I think the deeper motivation is that longing for belonging. And we try to also fit into that middle section, right? To be normal because we want to belong. But what we usually achieve is, if we are good, if we achieve it at all, we fit in. And fitting in and belonging are two different things, right? It doesn't fulfill that emptiness inside. It doesn't make you more satisfied.
Yes.
And
Mm.
by that attempt, we give up on ourselves, right? We try to limit unconsciously. Nobody that I ever met tries to limit themselves. This is a result, right? We limit parts of us that might be outside of that section, what we call normalcy, and we don't use it because we really want to belong. And that's probably the intense motivation that we deny parts of us. And it's also fear, right? What happens to me when I'm lonely on the outside? That's this still the negative bias, right? When we are outside of the cave at night and the saber-toothed tiger comes.
Yeah, we're not gonna be safe.
Right, we don't want to be the tiger's dinner, so we want to belong and want to be allowed into the cave. That's still ingrained into our brains.
Yeah.
And that's the driving force, that fear, and having that internal conversation. Yeah, fear, I see you, I hear you, I understand you, I know you are doing a great job, you want to protect me. Yet there is no tiger right now. I mean, depending on where you are, where we are is no tiger right now, right?
Let me look around. No, 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 no tiger.
No real, right? No real tiger right now. Yeah. So what's normal?
Hmm. So what happened next? You have, discovered the power of of your brain. What did you do next?
The classical thing I try to fit in. So I felt I couldn't go back into the engineer's world. I wanted to go back either fully or not at all. And with the little daughter, I wanted to do something. Don't get me wrong, but this was in my head. I know it's not true, but I wanted to do something easier with less hours that I didn't have to take home in my brain every day. So I went into the financial industry. I worked in a couple of different banks part-time, and I led a team there. And this was different than I had expected, right? When you lead a team or when you lead teams, of course you take it home with you when you think about that. So learned my lesson, and then I went to a different company and worked in human resources. I was responsible for human resources for a US-based company. I was responsible in Europe. And it was a huge learning lesson. It was very intense that I could use my analytical thinking, and I could also use that other part of me, that feeling part, that knowing part, to make people's lives easier in the workplace. And the next step that I did was that I founded my first business, and I became a coach. I focused on body language, micro expression, working with the brain, and this is what I still do today. Right now, here in the US, I'm an executive coach. I'm an energy healer. I work with executives, engineers, entrepreneurs, corporations, and I still use both. I still use my analytical thinking capacity, my scientific curiosity, and the spiritual wisdom. And this helps people to achieve their wildest dreams, to create their miracles, to to let this become reality, what people oftentimes don't think is possible. And that's what I do today.
And I'm so glad that you are doing that,
Thank you.
because you choosing all these steps and the crossroads in your path led us to to where we are today, led us to meet, led us to sit down and to know each other. And as I told you on the phone yesterday, as we were preparing for this podcast, I'm just so grateful to have met you and to know you. And now I'm so grateful that I can share you with the world, with others. So plugging in a grateful uh, a gratitude moment here. So thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're at this. Now I feel that in your story we have reached the engineering and the spirituality, and I know that um, you have more tools than I do in your tool bag, of how to talk about spirituality with people. So if you could pick one tool to share with our audience today, with engineers, which one would you pick?
That's a tough question you just asked, right? Yeah, which one tool would I share with engineers? So the questions that are going on in my head is, what would be most beneficial if I would start out as an engineer opening the door to the spiritual world?
Yes. Yes.
The one tool would be trust yourself, trust your soul. And I'm going to explain this a little more. And if you give me the time, I will explain how to
Yes.
use it
Yes.
practically. Okay. So trust your soul. Your soul is always talking to you. I mean, engineers, this might be a surprise. You have a soul. It's not a surprise. I'm kidding. I know you have one. The challenge might be that you're not used to listening to your soul. And
Yes.
the soul talks not in a loud volume. It's very low volume. Usually it's a whisper, the engineer whisperer, right? You. That's what the soul does. Our souls talk very, very gentle. And it's so easy to discard it. I did it for many years. I didn't believe that this is the soul's whisper. So the message is trust your soul. How do you do that? How can you differentiate if it's a soul message or if it's fear talking? A couple of things. Fear usually is loud and clear. You feel it. Fear wants to be seen, heard, wants to be recognized. The soul whisper, the opposite. And when you are really agitated and when you are in the go, go, go mode, when you're in high fear, you probably can't hear your soul's whisper. But to determine in the body who is speaking, there is an orientation that I want to give you when you feel that you are tightening up in the chest area, when you feel that your posture is like this, and oh my gosh, when you have that feeling, when maybe breathing gets a little harder, when you cannot fill up your lungs completely, when your breathing is shallow, that's most certainly fear talking. In comparison, when you have that feeling in your belly, what we call the gut feeling, right? When you have this cringe in your gut, it's usually not as intense as the feelings up here, but you have this cringe, or you have the butterflies for a short moment, right? This spark of excitement and butterflies. This is usually your soul talking. So as the first tool on the path to living your soul purpose, to trusting your soul more, I would say pay attention where you feel the sensation in your body. Is it in your upper body, in the chest area? Chances are very high that it's fear related. When you feel it lower down in your body area, and if it's shorter and often not as intense, chances are super high that your soul was talking.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. What comes to my mind is that the happiness, that that amazing happiness that, or that unconditional love and happiness that I feel. So I'll talk about myself. Is when I feel that way, I feel it in my lower part, so in the gut area. So I think I just made that connection as I was listening to you. Of, oh, that's why I feel it there. And
Mhm.
mm,
Right. And when you're on love, where do we feel it? Right. Yes, the heart beats faster, and the heart beats faster when we are in fear. But those butterflies, the butterflies, they live in the stomach. I had an experience today. I had someone I really appreciate and highly trust, my assistant. He said he had an idea and he shared the idea with me. And whilst he was talking, I had those tiny butterflies in my stomach. So I was super excited. It was a great idea. And this doesn't always happen, right? We have so many ideas that we know might be good, but it's not the idea. But today, this was so clear. Yes, he had an amazing idea. We follow through. This is what we are going to do. And my body supported me, right? Yes, my analytical mind is on board too. It's not that I make decisions solely on my physical sensations, but the combination of thinking, does it make sense? What is it? How does it work? Why would this be a good thing? And supported by the physical sensations. I mean, this is how I make decisions, right? I do a lot of charity work. I'm a board member of two different nonprofit organizations. One is for veterans, we are supporting veterans, and the other one is an AI focused organization. So, as I was asked to become a board member, that's not solely an analytical decision, right? That's a decision made based on my soul. Do I feel inclined to do that because it really aligns with my soul purpose?
exactly that alignment, and then that brings me back to the brain that you mentioned. There's two hemispheres, and there's a bridge. So it's the same way I turned it, and I work with engineers that you have a brain and you have a gut and a heart. So there's there's a reason why we have these parts, and they are connected. Um, so thank you very much for sharing
You're
that.
welcome.
Even yeah. So listening to you, I learned, as I said, I had an aha moment, and then I know that our listeners they're gonna take away something from here too, because it's so practical of what you're talking about. If we just pay attention, then we can distinguish which body part do we connect with more during the day. So that leads me to this other side of the tool that you shared, is to be in the moment, be present with yourself, with your thoughts, and with your feelings. And now I want to circle back with the brain, because I know as an engineer, I would say that you started analyzing, the brain. What is the brain about? What are the benefits of having two hemispheres? So tell us a little bit, tell us a little bit more of what you have learned about the brain that then, so that it can uh, help someone who's listening to who is curious.
Where do you want me to go with that? The different parts of the brain, what do they do, or brain health, or how can we figure out more? Let me wrap it all together a little bit. So I just gave you an outline again, what's going on in my analytical mind, right? So of course we know more or less exactly scientifically what parts of the brain do what. And not everyone needs to know this in detail, I think, right? Not everyone is a neurosurgeon, so that we know that we have to know exactly which area does what. What I think is very important that we understand that the brain develops over time. So when we start out as babies, as kids, the brain isn't fully developed. And the youngest part from the evolutionary standpoint and also from us growing up is that frontal lobe, that part of the brain right behind the forehead that judges, that makes decisions. That develops late, not late in life, but later than the other parts, right? Of course, we have that center in the brain that's responsible for movement and breathing. That's there first. But that part that can judge, makes decisions, that's the youngest part. And it might be kind of an excuse why we make, or at least I did, some stupid decisions in my youth. Because that frontal lobe wasn't fully developed. I didn't know at the time. But for females, it takes up to 25 years that the brain is fully developed. And for male humans with an X and a Y chromosome, it takes 27 years to be fully developed. And the more we use it, the more neural connections we create. The better we use the brain, the better we care for the brain. And I think this is an important part that hopefully helps our listener. And when you imagine the brain, it is about 3 pounds of weight, and it has the consistency of soft butter. And consists to roughly 60% of fat. So you have this fatty, soft mass within your skull, which is really hard and has rough edges. And when we move, when we do sports, when we fall, the brain bounces within that pretty harsh, rough bone. Yeah, head around us. So what can we do to take good care of our brain? First of all, protect your head, right? Protect your head. Think twice when you do what we call dangerous sports, when you play dangerous sports. And when you fall, when you hit your head, give your brain time to recover, even without having symptoms. If we don't have a diagnosed concussion, the brain gets hit and needs to recover. And how can we do this? Most importantly, rest. Rest is an animal in itself. Talking about rest and sleep, I could go on and on. Maybe we should tackle that as well. And also the diet you use, right? Thinking about the brain, that it consists to 60% of fat. We need healthy fats. We need a lot of healthy fats to nurture and nourish our brain. Most of American people's brain are starving for fat because many of us live on a low-fat diet or fat-free diet even. So where should the brain get the fuel from if we don't give it through nourishment, through our food, right? Super important. I mean, no engineer would ever expect an engine to run without charge or gas, fuel, right? But how often do we think that our brain can run with no fuel?
So that I think it's a good opportunity to ask as an engineer, as you dove into studying the brain, um, as part of, your journey, what was the most interesting thing that you found out that helped you to then, you know, it's that growth moment of, oh, knowing this now I can, or you made a connection with, something else.
Yes. So the most helpful thing for me was that I did a SPECT scan. A SPECT scan is a method that, yeah, that gives you a picture of your brain. Multiple pictures, right? It's you get some markers in your blood, and then the brain gets photographed a million times, and those
Yeah, they
million
put it
photographs,
together.
it's different than an MRI, for instance. So the SPECT scan gives you information about the activity in your brain, the blood flow, and you can compare which areas of your brain are active when they should be. How active are they? Are they more active, exactly how they should be, or lower in activity than to the situation that it should be, right?
Now that is very scientific right there. That is so cool and so like, let's go see the image, the data. So, what was the reason behind for you to have that?
Hmm. Of course, there are two stories again, right? The official story that I told myself why I wanted to do this procedure, because I had learned, I had studied with the Amen Clinic. They did it for me. There are different places where you can do this. I went to the Amen Clinic in New York City because I wanted to know how this procedure is done and what the information would reveal, the information we gather, so that I could make a conscious analytical decision to whom I would recommend this procedure, right? Me working with a lot of people, with people who suffer from substance use disorder, for instance, with veterans. I served as a firefighter myself, so I wanted to understand the procedure. Of course, with hindsight, yes, this was what got me there. The beautiful side effect was that I got to see my brain and that I saw the, yeah, as a picture, what the diagnosis of PTSD had given me before, right? I knew I had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, complex, to be precise. It's CPTSD, complex post, oh gosh, I lost my words. Post-traumatic stress disorder. And seeing it as a picture gave me so much relief, right? It was not just something that I made up again, self-doubt, right? That I thought I had enough time to heal from it. It should be gone by then.
Yeah.
It was still there and explained a lot of symptoms that I was experiencing. So it was kind of, okay, this is real. You're not making this up. And there is something really in your brain that needs attention, more attention than I already gave it. And the beauty of that procedure for me was, yeah, first I got to know my brain even better. And I also could see the studies they had done, I also could see the healing process. So with the work that we do, that you do, Andrea, that I do, and many of us do, the impact, the results that we help to create. When you see a brain that really suffers, and a while later you get an image of the exact same brain and it looks so much healthier. This is this is so rewarding, and this is so satisfying. It makes me even, yeah, very emotional, right? Because it's not quote unquote just believing, it's not quote unquote just having data. It's both. We do the work because we believe that we can create a positive impact in people's lives. And when you see it, when you have the data, when you have the image of a brain that really recovered, that it's healthy and vibrant and active, and in the areas where it's supposed to be active, in the
Yes.
situation when it's supposed to be active,
Yes.
and not on overdrive all the time, or not on low, really just the bare minimum that it can achieve. That is so rewarding and super exciting for me.
Yes, yes. I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm getting goosebumps because I mean, it's believing that change can happen, that health can, that healing can happen, that, as you said in your story too, I thought I had no choice to believing in choices, and then now making choices to heal, to live life differently, to be happier, to be healthier, and then to see that, as you said. And this is why I wanted you to come and be on the podcast today to share this belief that we both share, that it's not either or, it's an and. It's it's the engineering and spirituality, is the data and the beliefs, is the one part of the brain and the other part of the brain. It's the gut and the brain and the mind. Because when we choose to live like that with an and, when we choose to connect them in our lives, then that's when, um, well, magic happens. I've seen it
Exactly. Yeah.
myself, and
Yeah. Yeah. This is
I,
exactly how we create miracles. And it's never too late. It really, it's never too late. And whatever you're thinking, listening to this podcast right now, whatever you are dealing with, whatever you are contemplating, there's always a solution. There's a choice, even though you might not see it. And it's never too late. Believe in yourself. Trust your soul.
well, I think this is a great opportunity to stop here and make this part one, and then we'll come back and we'll talk more about, well, more about how to live a life with choices and spirituality in engineering. So let me give you a big, big thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sitting down with us today and for sharing your journey, your wisdom, and these words with us. Thank you
Thank you
very
for
much,
having me.
Petra.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank
And
you.
we'll come back with part two, so stay tuned.